You can feel when love shifts. It's not a sudden earthquake that tears the foundation apart in one violent moment. No, it's quieter than that, more insidious. It's the slow erosion of something that used to be solid, the kind of change that happens so gradually, you almost convince yourself you're imagining it. But you're not. Deep down, in that place where your instincts live, where your gut knows things before your brain is willing to admit them, you know something has changed. You know something is wrong. It started on a Saturday morning, an ordinary Saturday morning, the kind we'd had 100 times before. She was smiling. That should have been a good thing, right? But her smile didn't reach her eyes anymore. Have you ever noticed that? How someone can stretch their lips into the shape of happiness while their eyes remain distant, detached, like they're looking at a stranger instead of the person they promised to spend their life with. Her phone never left her side. Not during breakfast, not during the pretend conversation we had about nothing important, not when she got up to pour more coffee. It was always there, clutched in her hand or face down on the table, screen hidden like it held state secrets instead of text messages. And maybe it did hold secrets. Just not the kind that protect nations, the kind that destroy marriages. I watched her laugh at something on that screen, a real laugh, the kind she used to give me, the kind that made her whole face light up and her shoulders shake just slightly, the kind of laugh that made me fall in love with her in the first place. But now that laugh was for pixels and whoever was on the other side of them. Not for me, never for me anymore. You know what hurts? It's not the big dramatic moments you see in movies. It's not the shouting or the throwing of objects or the slamming of doors. It's the quiet moments. It's reaching for your wife's hand during dinner and watching her pull away to check a notification. It's asking about her day and getting one-word answers. Fine, good, nothing. Words that used to be full sentences, full stories, full of life. Now they're just walls. Barriers. Distance disguised as brevity. I tried. God, I tried. I'd start conversations about us, about our plans, about anything that might bridge the growing canyon between us. And she'd smile that empty smile and tell me I was overthinking things. You're always so worried, she'd say, like my concern for our marriage was a character flaw instead of a desperate attempt to save something that was slipping through my fingers like water. The house became heavy with something I couldn't name. Not quite tension, not quite anger, just this oppressive weight, like the air itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to break. I started noticing things, small things, inconsistencies that probably meant nothing on their own but together painted a picture I didn't want to see. New perfume. She'd worn the same scent for 3 years, and suddenly there was something different, something I didn't recognize. When I mentioned it, she said she wanted to try something new. Can't a woman change her perfume without it being a federal investigation? The defensiveness in her voice told me more than her words did. Deleted call logs. I wasn't snooping, not at first. But when your wife leaves her phone face up on the counter and you glance over and see that her call history has been wiped clean, you start to wonder. You start to question. You start to feel this sick, twisting feeling in your gut that tells you something is very, very wrong. She started working late more often. Meetings that ran long, projects that needed her attention after hours, dinners with colleagues I'd never heard her mention before, and I wanted to believe her. I did. Because the alternative was too painful to consider. The alternative meant that the woman I loved, the woman I'd built a life with, was capable of deception, was capable of betrayal. But people tell on themselves when they think you're too in love to notice. They get careless, confident. They start to believe their own lies so thoroughly that they forget to cover their tracks as carefully. They forget that love makes you attentive, makes you notice the small changes, the subtle shifts in behavior. I started keeping track, not obsessively, not at first. Just notes to myself, mental timestamps. She said she was at a work dinner on Tuesday, but I saw her colleague post photos from home that same evening. She claimed she was visiting her mother on Thursday, but her mother called our house looking for her. Small cracks in the story. Hairline fractures that would eventually split wide open. The final straw came on a random Wednesday evening. Nothing special about the day. Nothing that should have made it memorable. She came home and I tried to hug her the way I used to, the way husbands are supposed to hug their wives when they return home. And she barely acknowledged it, patted my arm like I was a distant relative at a funeral, polite but distant, obligatory but empty. That night, lying in bed with her back to me, she said something that burned itself into my memory. You'd fall apart without me. Not I love you, not good night, not even I'm tired. Just that. You'd fall apart without me. Said with such casual certainty, such absolute conviction, like she'd already decided that I was weak, that I was dependent, that I was nothing without her. Like she'd already written a story of how things would go when the truth came out. I didn't argue, didn't defend myself. I just lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, memorizing that sentence, letting it replay in my mind over and over. And something shifted in me that night. Something fundamental. The desperate need to save our marriage transformed into something else. A quiet determination to discover the truth, whatever it was, however much it hurt. I'm not a jealous person by nature. I never checked her phone, never followed her, never demanded to know where she was every minute of the day. I trusted her completely, the way you're supposed to trust your spouse, the way marriage is supposed to work. But trust, once broken, doesn't heal easily. And suspicion, once planted, grows like weeds in untended soil. The next Friday, she told me she was meeting her cousin for dinner. Rebecca. They were close, or at least they used to be before we got married and life got busy. It seemed plausible, normal, the kind of thing wives do, catch up with family over wine and appetizers. But something in her voice was off, too rehearsed, too casual, like she'd practiced the lie in her head before saying it out loud, and that sick feeling in my gut intensified, twisted, demanded attention. I didn't plan to follow her. I want you to understand that. I'm not that person. I don't do spy movies and car chases and hiding in shadows. But I found myself getting in my car, found myself driving in the same direction she'd gone, found myself parking across the street from the restaurant she'd mentioned. And I watched. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. My breath came in short, shallow gasps. My heart hammered against my ribs like it was trying to escape my chest. I didn't want to see what I knew I was about to see, but I couldn't look away. She walked into the restaurant, alone, no Rebecca, no cousin, no family dinner. Just her, in that new dress I'd complimented her on last week, the one she'd smiled about and said made her feel pretty, the one she was wearing for someone else. 10 minutes later, he arrived, tall, clean-cut, confident in the way men are when they think they're getting away with something. He greeted her with a familiarity that made my stomach turn. His hand on the small of her back, guiding her to their table, the way she leaned into him, comfortable, natural, like they'd done this 100 times before. I watched them sit, watched him reach across the table and take her hand, watched her let him, watched her laugh at something he said, that same laugh I'd heard at breakfast, the one that used to belong to me, the one I thought was mine, forever. I took out my phone. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold it steady, but I managed. One photo, then another. Evidence of something I'd suspected but desperately hoped wasn't true. Proof that the woman I loved had become someone I didn't know. I didn't storm in there, didn't cause a scene, didn't confront them in front of a restaurant full of strangers. Some part of me wanted to flip tables and shout and demand answers. But a stronger part of me knew that anger, raw and uncontrolled, would only make me look like the villain in a story where I was the victim. So I drove home. Calm on the outside, shattered on the inside. The drive felt both endless and instantaneous. My mind raced with questions I didn't want to answer. How long had this been going on? Who was he? Did she love him? Did she ever really love me? I didn't cry. Not that night. Some truths dry your tears before they even fall. Some pain runs so deep it bypasses emotion entirely and settles into your bones, cold and permanent and unyielding. This was that kind of pain. She came home 2 hours later, smiled at me, asked about my evening, kissed my cheek with lips that had probably kissed him, told me dinner with Rebecca was nice, that they'd had a good time catching up, that she was tired and wanted to go to bed early. And I said nothing, did nothing, just nodded and smiled and played the role of the trusting husband. Because I'd learned something important that night. I'd learned that confrontation without preparation is just noise. That anger without strategy is just weakness. That if I was going to do this, if I was going to tear apart the lie we were living, I needed to do it right. I started investigating, carefully, methodically. I checked our credit card statements and found charges at restaurants I'd never been to on nights she claimed to be working late. I looked through her car and found receipts with 2 meals, 2 drinks, intimate dinners for 2 while I ate alone at home. I created a folder on my laptop. Screenshots of deleted text messages I'd managed to recover, photos from that night at the restaurant, timestamps and dates, and a growing mountain of evidence that painted a picture I never wanted to see but couldn't unsee. And then I found him. His name was David, married, a detail that added another layer of betrayal to the whole sordid situation. He wasn't just destroying my marriage. He was destroying his own. He had a wife, Claire. I found her through his social media, which he'd been stupid enough to leave public. Claire, who smiled in photos with him, the same way I used to smile in photos with my wife. Claire, who had no idea that her husband was spending his evenings in restaurants with someone else's wife. I stared at Claire's photo for a long time. Felt a connection to this stranger, this woman I'd never met but who understood my pain better than anyone else could. We were living parallel lives, her and I, married to liars, betrayed by people we trusted, victims of the same crime. I called her. My hands shook as I dialed. My voice cracked when she answered. I didn't know how to start this conversation. How do you tell a stranger that her husband is having an affair? How do you shatter someone's world with a phone call? Is this Claire? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Yes? Who is this? My name doesn't matter right now, but I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen carefully. Your husband David is having an affair with my wife. I have proof. I have photos. I have evidence, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry to be the one to tell you this, but you deserve to know the truth. Silence. Long and heavy and suffocating. I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line, could almost feel her world tilting on its axis the way mine had tilted in that restaurant parking lot. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet, controlled. Show me. I sent her everything, every photo, every screenshot, every piece of evidence I'd collected. And I waited while she looked through it all, knowing that each image was a knife to her heart the same way it had been to mine. She called back an hour later. Her voice was steadier now, harder. The shock had worn off and been replaced by something else, something that mirrored what I'd felt. Not rage, not hysteria, just cold, clear determination. What are you going to do? She asked. I don't know yet. Confront her, I guess. End it. Move on. That's it? That's all they get? A confrontation and then they move on with their lives while we pick up the pieces? I hadn't thought beyond the confrontation. Hadn't planned past the moment of revelation. But Claire had a point. If they could lie to us quietly, couldn't we let the truth speak quietly too? Couldn't we do this in a way that made them understand the depth of what they'd done? What did you have in mind? I asked. And that's when we started planning. Not revenge exactly, just clarity, just truth delivered in a way they couldn't ignore or dismiss or gaslight their way out of. We weren't going to yell or scream or break things. We were going to be calm, dignified. We were going to show them that they hadn't broken us, they just revealed themselves. The next Saturday I told my wife I'd invited a guest for dinner. She seemed confused but not concerned. Who? Just someone I thought we should all meet, I said, keeping my tone casual. I think it'll be good. She shrugged, went back to her phone, probably texting him. Planning their next secret meeting, building their next lie, completely unaware that the foundation of her deception was about to crumble. I cooked, made her favorite meal. Set the table nicely, lit candles. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, preparing a romantic dinner for the confrontation that would end our marriage. But there was something fitting about it, something poetic. One last beautiful lie before the ugly truth. She came downstairs dressed nicely, made an effort with her makeup and hair. I wondered if she thought this was some kind of romantic gesture on my part, some attempt to rekindle what we'd lost. The thought almost made me laugh. Almost. The doorbell rang at exactly 7 o'clock. Claire was punctual. I'd give her that. "I'll get it," I said, watching my wife's face for any sign that she suspected something. Nothing. Just mild curiosity about who would be visiting on a Saturday evening. I opened the door and Claire stood there, elegant, composed, beautiful in the way that confident women are beautiful. She met my eyes and nodded slightly. We'd rehearsed this. We knew what we were doing. "Please come in," I said, stepping aside. My wife appeared in the doorway to the dining room. Her smile was polite, welcoming, the smile of a woman greeting a stranger she assumed was a friend of her husband's. And then recognition dawned, slowly at first. A flicker of something in her eyes, confusion maybe, a sense that this woman looked familiar but she couldn't place from where, and then understanding. Full and complete and devastating. The color drained from her face like someone had pulled a plug. Her smile died, not faded, died, just stopped existing like it had never been real in the first place. What is this?" Her voice was barely a whisper, small, frightened, nothing like the confident woman who told me I'd fall apart without her. I gestured to the dining room. "Please, let's sit. We have a lot to discuss." Claire walked past my wife without a word. Sat at the table I'd set, folded her hands in her lap and waited. Calm, patient, in control. My wife looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw the moment she understood, the moment she realized that I knew, that her carefully constructed web of lies had been torn apart, that the game was over. "You said I'd fall apart without you," I said softly, remembering that night. That sentence. "Let's see if you can stand without your lies." She tried to speak, opened her mouth and nothing came out, then tried again. I don't know what you think is happening here, but..." I took out my phone, pulled up the photos, the evidence. Months of documentation laid out in neat chronological order. Every lie, every secret meeting, every betrayal captured in pixels and timestamps. "This is Claire," I said, my voice steady. Calm, not angry, just factual. "She's David's wife. You remember David, don't you? The man you've been having dinner with when you tell me you're with Rebecca? The man whose hand you hold in restaurants while I eat alone at home?" The silence was deafening. I could hear the clock ticking in the hallway, could hear my own heartbeat, could hear my wife's quick, panicked breathing. She looked at Claire, then at me, then at the photos on my phone. And I watched her cycle through the stages. Denial first. "This isn't, you don't understand. It's not what it looks like." How many times have those words been spoken by people caught in lies? How many times have they ever been true? Claire spoke for the first time, her voice quiet but firm. "I've seen the messages, the photos, the credit card statements. I know about the hotel on August 3rd. I know about the weekend you told me you were at a conference in Chicago. I know everything." My wife's denial shifted to justifications. "You don't know what it's been like. You're always working, always distracted, always..." She was looking at me now, desperate, grasping for anything that might shift the blame, anything that might make this my fault instead of hers. I didn't take the bait, didn't engage with the deflection. Just sat there, calm and quiet, letting her words fall flat in the space between us. When justification failed, she tried guilt. Tears started flowing, real tears. I'll give her that. She was genuinely upset. Though whether she was upset about being caught or upset about what she'd done, I couldn't say. Probably the former. "I'm sorry," she sobbed. "I'm so sorry. I never meant for this to happen. I never meant to hurt you. Please, we can fix this. We can go to counseling. We can work through this. Please don't do this, please." And there it was. The begging, the pleading, the assumption that forgiveness was possible, that our marriage was salvageable, that love could survive this kind of betrayal. I stood up, slowly, deliberately, looked down at the woman I'd married, the woman who'd promised to love and cherish me, to forsake all others, to be faithful until death parted us. Those vows felt like relics from another life now. Ancient promises made by people who no longer existed. You don't destroy a home and expect to keep the keys, I said quietly. I walked to the front door, opened it. The message was clear, silent but unmistakable. This conversation was over. This marriage was over. Everything we'd built together had been burned down by her choices, and I wasn't going to stand in the ashes pretending we could rebuild. She looked at Claire, maybe hoping for some kind of solidarity, some woman-to-woman understanding, but Claire just stared back, expressionless. We were united in our betrayal, partners in pain, and we owed her nothing. No comfort, no understanding, no forgiveness. My wife gathered her purse, walked to the door, paused there, maybe thinking I'd stop her, that this was some kind of bluff, that I didn't really mean it. But I stood there, hand on the doorknob, waiting, and she finally understood that I was serious, that this was really happening, that her actions had consequences she couldn't charm or cry her way out of. She left. The door closed behind her. And the silence that followed was different from the heavy, oppressive silence that had filled our house for months. This was lighter, cleaner, the silence of truth instead of lies, the silence of endings instead of pretending. Claire and I sat in that dining room for a long time. Didn't talk much, didn't need to. We'd both just watched our marriages die, both witnessed the death of trust and the birth of something we didn't want to become. People who'd been betrayed, people who'd trusted and been punished for it. What now? Claire finally asked. Now we deal with David, I said. That meeting happened the following week. Claire asked him to come to our house, told him we needed to discuss something important about their marriage. He showed up concerned, playing the role of the caring husband. The irony was palpable. The look on his face when he walked into the living room and saw me sitting there with Claire was almost identical to my wife's reaction. That same draining of color, that same flash of recognition followed by fear, followed by desperate calculation. What's going on? He asked, though he already knew. You could see it in his eyes. Guilt is hard to hide when you're confronted with it directly. Claire didn't waste time. She laid out the evidence, photos, messages, hotel receipts, a timeline of every lie he'd told, every evening he claimed to be working late, every business trip that wasn't actually business. He tried the same playbook my wife had used. Denial, justification, guilt. I'm sorry. I made a mistake. It didn't mean anything. I love you. We can fix this. But we were past apologies, past explanations, past the point where words could heal the wounds that actions had created. You both thought the dark would protect you, I said, looking between David and the empty space where my wife should have been. You thought secret meetings and deleted messages and lies would keep your betrayal hidden. But darkness only works until someone turns on the light. And it didn't. Claire stood up, looked at her husband with an expression I recognized. The same look I'd given my wife. Not anger, not hatred, just profound disappointment. The death of respect. The end of love. You need to leave, she said simply. And he did, without argument, without protest. Just gathered his dignity, what little remained of it, and walked out of the house he'd shared with Claire for 6 years. We stood there in the aftermath. Two people who'd done nothing wrong except trust the wrong people. Two people who'd been loyal and faithful and honest, only to have those qualities weaponized against us. How do you feel? Claire asked. I thought about it, really thought about it. Empty, I finally said. But not in a bad way. Empty like when you've been carrying something heavy for so long that putting it down feels strange even though it's a relief. She nodded. Yeah, that's exactly it. Revenge isn't rage. That's what I learned through all of this. It's not screaming or breaking things or making dramatic gestures that make you feel powerful in the moment but hollow later. Real revenge is walking away while the guilty beg for noise. It's refusing to engage with their justifications. It's taking back your power by refusing to let them keep any of theirs. The divorce was surprisingly simple. No fault in our state, which felt almost insulting given very clear fault, but it didn't matter. We divided assets. signed papers, turned our marriage into a legal document stamped with official seals and filed away in a courthouse somewhere. 8 years together reduced to paperwork and signatures. I moved to a new apartment, smaller than our house, quieter, mine in a way that our shared space never really was. Peace felt unfamiliar at first. I'd grown so accustomed to the weight of secrets, the oppressive atmosphere of lies, that actual peace felt almost uncomfortable. Too light, too quiet, too empty. I spent weekends hiking, alone, just me in trails and trees and silence that wasn't heavy with unspoken truths. I rediscovered hobbies I'd abandoned, books I'd meant to read, music I'd stopped listening to, parts of myself I'd let atrophy in the service of a marriage that had been dying slowly for longer than I'd wanted to admit. Claire and I stayed in touch, not romantically. There was no rebound relationship, no finding solace in each other's arms the way movies might suggest, just friendship born from shared trauma. Understanding that came from parallel pain. We'd meet for coffee occasionally, talk about healing, about trust, about whether we'd ever be able to open ourselves up to someone again. "I don't know if I can do it," she admitted once. "Trust someone like that again. Give them the power to hurt me the way David did." "I know," I said, because I did. The fear of repetition is real. The scars left by betrayal run deep. They change the way you see people, the way you interpret actions, the way you guard your heart. But here's what I learned. Some scars don't fade, but they stop hurting when you stop touching them. You don't need to constantly revisit the pain to remember the lesson. You don't need to carry the weight of betrayal into every new relationship, every new connection, every new possibility. My wife tried to reach out a few times. Texts, emails, voice messages I deleted without listening to. She wanted closure, she said, wanted to explain, wanted me to understand. But I didn't need any of that. I understood perfectly. She'd made choices. Those choices had consequences. And those consequences included losing me. The thing about betrayal is that it reveals more about the betrayer than the betrayed. Her cheating wasn't a reflection of my inadequacy. It was a reflection of her character, her choices, her willingness to prioritize momentary pleasure over lasting commitment. I could have let it destroy me, could have let it poison my view of love, of trust, of relationships. Could have become bitter and cynical and closed off. Part of me wanted to. The hurt part, the angry part, the part that wanted to protect itself from ever feeling this kind of pain again. But I chose differently. Because letting her betrayal change me into someone I wasn't would be giving her power she didn't deserve, would be letting her take more than she'd already taken. And I refused. Absolutely refused to let her theft of my trust become theft of my capacity to trust. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I went back to our old house one last time. It was being sold, divided as part of the settlement. The new owners were moving in the following week. I stood in the empty living room, footsteps echoing on hardwood floors that had once been covered with our furniture, our memories, our life together. The afternoon sun streamed through the windows. Dust motes danced in the light. The house felt different, empty, smaller somehow, less significant, like it had only ever been as important as the life we'd lived in it. And now that life was gone, it was just rooms and walls and space waiting for someone else's story. I thought about the morning I'd watched her laugh at her phone, the night she told me I'd fall apart without her, the moment I'd seen her with him in that restaurant. All the pain and anger and betrayal compressed into a timeline that felt both endless and instantaneous. And I realized something. Love isn't proven by who stays. It's revealed by who lies. My wife had stayed in our marriage physically while leaving it emotionally, had shared our bed while sharing herself with someone else, had spoken vows while breaking them. The staying meant nothing. The lying revealed everything. I didn't lose her. I lost someone pretending to love me. And that's not a loss. That's a liberation. That's the removal of a poison I'd been drinking thinking it was medicine. That's the truth setting me free from a beautiful lie. I walked through each room one last time. Kitchen where we'd cooked together in the early days. Bedroom where we'd slept side by side while growing miles apart. Bathroom where she'd put on that new perfume for him. Each space was a ghost of something that had seemed real but wasn't. Each memory was tainted now, recontextualized by the truth I discovered. But standing there in the empty house, I didn't feel sad. Not anymore. I felt grateful. Grateful for the truth, however painful. Grateful for the clarity that came from seeing her for who she really was instead of who I'd wanted her to be. Grateful for the opportunity to rebuild my life on a foundation of truth instead of lies. I locked the door behind me for the last time, drove away without looking back. And something shifted inside me. Not healing exactly. Not yet, but the beginning of healing. The first steps toward becoming someone new, someone stronger. Someone who'd survived betrayal and come out the other side intact. Claire texted me later that week. "How are you doing?" "Better," I replied. And I meant it. "Me too," she wrote back. "It's strange, isn't it? How losing something that was hurting us can feel like a relief." It was strange, but it was true. The weight I'd been carrying, the constant stress of living in a dying marriage, the exhausting work of pretending everything was fine when nothing was fine, all of that was gone now. And in its absence was space. Room to breathe, room to grow, room to become whoever I was meant to be without the anchor of someone else's betrayal dragging me down. I started therapy, not because I was broken, but because I wanted to process everything in a healthy way. Wanted to understand my own role in what had happened, not in terms of blame, but in terms of growth. What had I missed? What signs had I ignored? How could I be more aware, more present, more honest with myself and others moving forward? My therapist asked me once, "What do you want now? What does your life look like without her?" I thought about it for a long time. Quiet, I finally said, but the good kind of quiet. Not the heavy silence of unspoken truths, just peace, actual peace. "And do you think you can find that?" "I'm already finding it," I said, and I was. Peace feels louder when you've lived through chaos. It demands attention in a way that noise never does. Chaos is easy to get lost in, easy to let consume you, but peace requires intention, requires choosing calm over drama, requires walking away from situations and people who drain you instead of filling you up. I thought about my wife sometimes, wondered if she ended up with David or if that relationship fell apart the way ours had, wondered if she felt regret or if she'd already rewritten the narrative in her head, made herself the victim, made me the villain. It didn't matter. Her story was hers to tell, mine was mine, and my story wasn't about her betrayal, it was about my survival. My growth, my refusal to let someone else's choices define my worth or determine my future. I went on dates eventually, tentative at first, guarded, but slowly learning to open up again, to risk again, to trust again with eyes wide open and boundaries firmly in place. Not every date led anywhere, most didn't, but each one was practice. Each one was proof that I could still put myself out there, still be vulnerable, still hope for connection, despite knowing how badly it could hurt. One evening, sitting in a coffee shop with a woman I had met through mutual friends, she asked me about my divorce. I gave her the short version, the one that didn't include all the pain and anger and betrayal. Just it didn't work out and we wanted different things. "Do you think you'll ever marry again?" she asked. I thought about it, really thought about it. "Maybe," I said. "If I find someone worth trusting with that kind of commitment, someone who understands that marriage isn't just about staying, it's about being honest, being present, being faithful in actions as well as words." She smiled. "That sounds like a high bar." "It is," I agreed. "But I'd rather be alone than settle for less." And I meant it. The old me, the me who'd been married to a woman who didn't respect our vows, might have settled, might have accepted crumbs of affection and called it love. Might have convinced himself that something was better than nothing. But the new me knew better. Knew that being alone wasn't the worst thing that could happen. Being with someone who made you feel alone, that was worse. Being betrayed by someone you trusted completely, that was worse. Wasting years on someone who was never fully yours, that was worse. I ran into my ex-wife once, randomly, at a grocery store of all places. We made eye contact across the produce section. She looked different, Tired maybe, or older, or just unfamiliar, like someone I used to know in another life. She started to approach. I could see the intention in her body language, the half step forward, the opening of her mouth to speak. But I turned away, kept shopping, didn't engage, because I didn't owe her anything. Not conversation, not closure, not forgiveness, nothing. Some people might call that cold, might say I should have been the bigger person, should have heard her out, should have given her the opportunity to apologize properly. But those people don't understand what betrayal feels like. Don't understand that forgiveness isn't always necessary for healing, that you can move on without ever giving the person who hurt you the satisfaction of your attention. I saw Claire one last time before she moved to another city for a job opportunity. We had dinner. Real dinner this time. Not the traumatic confrontation kind. Just two friends sharing a meal and reflecting on how far we'd come. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we'd never found out? She asked. If they'd kept their secret and we'd just stayed married to people who were cheating on us? I used to, I said. But not anymore. Because living in a lie isn't really living. It's just existing, going through motions. And I'd rather face painful truth than comfortable lies any day. She raised her glass. To painful truths. I clinked mine against hers. And to the freedom they bring. We said goodbye that night, knowing we probably wouldn't see each other again. Our lives had intersected because of tragedy, had been bound together by shared pain, but now we were both healing, both moving forward, both becoming people who didn't need constant reminders of what we'd survived. I think about that night sometimes, the night I invited Claire to dinner and watched my wife's face drain of color, the moment I took back my power by refusing to play the role she'd assigned me. The role of the foolish husband who'd fall apart without her. I didn't fall apart. I stood up, walked away, rebuilt myself piece by piece, and in doing so I proved that her greatest weapon against me, her certainty that I needed her more than she needed honesty, was just another lie in a relationship built on them. You know what the hardest part of betrayal is? It's not the initial pain, it's not even the anger or the sense of violation, it's the aftermath, the long, slow process of learning to trust again. Learning to believe that not everyone is a liar, that not every smile hides a secret, that not every I love you is a manipulation, but I'm learning, day by day, moment by moment. I'm learning that my ex-wife's betrayal says nothing about me and everything about her. I'm learning that I deserve better than someone who could look me in the eye and lie without flinching. I'm learning that being alone is not the same as being lonely, and that peace, even solitary peace, is infinitely better than the chaos of a dishonest relationship. I still have hard days, days when I wonder if I'll ever fully trust someone again, days when I question whether the risk of love is worth the potential for pain, days when I feel the weight of what was stolen from me, the years I gave to someone who didn't value them. But those days are getting fewer, further apart, less consuming, because healing isn't linear. It's not a straight path from pain to peace. It's messy and complicated and full of setbacks, but it's happening. Slowly, steadily, inevitably. I'm building a new life now, one based on honesty, on self-respect, on the understanding that I control my own happiness, that I don't need someone else to complete me, that wholeness comes from within, not from another person. And someday, maybe, I'll meet someone who deserves my trust. Someone who understands that love without honesty is just a beautiful lie. Someone who shows up fully, faithfully, honestly. Someone who knows that marriage isn't about staying together when it's easy. It's about staying honest even when it's hard. But until then, I'm okay. More than okay. I'm learning to enjoy my own company. Learning to find joy in simple things. Learning that the person I lost wasn't the person I thought she was. And that losing an illusion, however painful, is ultimately a gift. Because now I see clearly, now I understand. Now I know that love isn't about pretty words and empty promises. It's about actions, consistency, truth, and anyone who can't offer those things doesn't deserve a place in my life. So here I am, standing in the wreckage of what was and the possibility of what could be, scarred but not broken, hurt but healing. changed but not destroyed. My ex-wife was wrong. I didn't fall apart without her. I found myself, found strength I didn't know I had, found peace I didn't think was possible, found freedom and truth and power in walking away. And if I could go back to that morning when I first noticed her acting different, when I first felt that sick twist in my gut that told me something was wrong, I wouldn't change anything. Because every moment of pain led me here, to this place, this understanding, this version of myself that's stronger, wiser, more aware. The truth did set me free, but not in the way I expected, not through forgiveness or reconciliation or working things out, through revelation, through the clear-eyed acknowledgement that what I thought I had was never really mine, that what I thought we were was a fiction she'd been writing while I believed it was real. And now I'm writing my own story, one where I'm not the fool who stayed, not the victim who fell apart, not the broken man who couldn't recover from betrayal. I'm the person who survived, who learned, who grew, who refused to let someone else's choices define his worth. Peace feels louder when you've lived through chaos, and I'm finally hearing it, finally feeling it, finally understanding that this, right here, this quiet certainty that I'm exactly where I need to be, this is what freedom sounds like. I didn't lose her. I lost someone pretending to love me. And that's not a loss. That's a victory I didn't know I was fighting for.